Migration is nothing new. It's a phenomenon which is on our agenda for ages, for centuries. And I dare to say each country, as it exists now, including the Russian Federation, is a result of migratory movements. So in Russia there were Slav tribes, groups traveling over your country, Mongols traveling, the Huns going here and there. And in my country, the Netherlands, it were Germanic tribes. We were open to receive people in need of protection. So during the religious wars in the, 17th century, we received many Protestant people, many Jewish people, and so forth and so further. So we are a result of migration, in fact, states as they exist now. Europe, nor Russia, is able to solve all the problems for other countries. That having said that, of course, since all the cruel developments, world wars and so on, we have accepted generally as a global standard that people who are in need of protection have to be protected. And obviously for the European Union, the experience have been during the last decade of the last century, the Balkan Wars, and more recently the civil war in Syria. And as a consequence of all these events, now we are confronted with influx of people from poor or failed state nations on the African continent. Migration, but also refugees. It's a question of stable environment and an environment in conflict. And those who are living in an area of conflict wants to look for a better future. They want to move to a stable environment, which is the European continent as such. And we have provided legislation to deal with those migrants. So we have legislation with regard to which is the member state responsible to examine requests for asylum. We also have developed minimum standards how to receive migrants, housing, shelter, food, clothes and so on, and also about legal procedures. So even if we dismiss an application for protection, you have to provide for legal assistance and access to justice to have a possibility of an appeal. Well, I think the first point which should be mentioned is that on an overall basis the problem is not a very big one, because on a population of 520 million as we are now, we're talking to about 0.5% of people coming in from other countries of origin. Having said that, obviously we're still talking about 2 million or a little bit more of migrants who have come during the last years to Europe. And certainly then the question is, are you open to receive not so much people from the European continent, although Bosnians had also other religious background compared to the Christians in Western Europe, for example, but it's also about the religion, the origin, other civilization. And there we have experienced that some member states take a much more reluctant attitude compared to others. So I think here, in all honesty, we can refer to a divide between West and East. Not so much between North and South, but East and West. So the countries of the Visegrad, essentially, they are much more reserved. They don't have an experience, they don't have a practice, and they are not willing to be involved in how to deal with such a big number of migrants coming to their country. So they stick to the principle that migrants have to stay there where they arrive in the European Union. There is also a divide between North and South, because practice has shown over the last years that all the burdens were on the shoulders of the countries located in the southern part of the European Union. Greece, which is a country already suffering from the economic crisis, but also Italy, who is also a country which is economically not very strong in a way, and Spain lately. what we try to do, and this is a rather topical issue now, high on the agenda of the political leaders, so it's one of the clear priorities. We want to pay assistance and stabilize the countries of origin. So if you're now asking for what are now the main priorities, how to try to tackle this problem, first of all the focus is to the countries of origin, how to stabilize them. And if we cannot stabilize them, how to provide for secure areas in the neighborhood. So in between Central Africa and the Mediterranean, how to provide for secure areas, that's a clear topic. And the other one is to try to create an environment in Europe where we can easily exercise an adequate examination of the justification of a request for asylum and so forth. So there are a number of political priorities. First, and we are able and willing to spend a lot of money to the process of good governance and investments in the countries of origin, then to provide for first reception facilities in the neighborhood, but also try to control essentially the whole procedure in Europe by not too much bothering too many countries with migrants. So the background is also Eastern Europe. So if we keep them in safe areas in France, in Spain, in the Netherlands, but you could also say in Hungary, without forcing Hungary to take them in once their application is accepted. In fact, the problem is about many people, but essentially it's a question of organization. You have to put in place a correct, effective infrastructure and to provide for human capacity. Thousands and thousands immigration officers. However, in practice, there are of course problems with people who have no identification documents with them, and out of an interview you do not get an impression, is this a person to be qualified as a refugee, or is it an economic migrant, is it a criminal, an illegal migrant, which could also be the case. That is a bit of the problem. Essentially from a European perspective it's about organization. So far we have not done very well in that respect. We have to do better. So it's not so much political, it has become a political issue because we were not able to deal properly with organizational, and we have to do better. I must say that the migration problem is one of the top priorities on the agenda. Again, it's a pity because we have other topics as well on the agenda. We have the problem of still the remainders, the effects of the economic crisis. We have the Brexit problem internally and externally. The European Union is surrounded by turmoil and regions of conflict. There is obviously also the Russia-Ukraine problem, or the Ukraine crisis, which we have to try to solve. So we have to give this a place, but very quickly, because numbers are going down. So I refer to in total about 2 million people, which is not effectively that much, but compared to the figures in 2015, when you calculate now 2018, you can easily argue numbers have gone down with more than 90%. But still, I think the first half year of 2018, we had to deal with 50,000 applications. My guess is overall 2018, 100,000, which is doable. And then once we have solved this problem, we can focus on other measures which have to contribute to more stability internally and to more activity in the external domain, trying to develop European Union as a global actor, a real global actor.